From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. But who really cares? It's what they do best. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Week 10 edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined as always by Mike Graham. Mike, just 2 weeks left in the regular season. Can you believe it? Time sure flies by.
It does. This is the big week, I think. I think this week is probably even bigger than next week with so many teams trying to stave off elimination. That's what happens.
The further you get into the season, the bigger the weeks become. And we last week we had some interesting results come through East Texas, and the playoff picture is kind of beginning to take shape a little bit. And we got tons of big matchups this week, so let's get right to it. How about those Longview Lobos? They're doing what they've done forever, it seems like. Everybody was worried about them. Folks in Longview were hitting the panic button and hitting it repeatedly after that 0-2 start. It wasn't pretty for Longview early on, but you and I both felt like that things would eventually settle down, and boy, have they.
Yeah, they've definitely settled down, and what a turnaround, because the team that took the field for the first two games did not look like this team at all. And Longview is competitive, and they look good heading into the playoffs, and they're going to draw a favorable matchup in the playoffs, so things looking really good. Desmond Chumley has really turned his season around. John Story is a receiver that started off slow as a junior, and he has emerged in Antonio Carter in the receiving core, and then Tylen Miller at running back, and Marquise Gwynn. They have it all on offense.
Marquise Hunter, right?
Marquise Hunter, and they have it all on defense as well.
Yeah, we mentioned that the role that they're on. They've won 6 in a row, and with a win this Friday night at Sulphur Springs, and Sulphur Springs is having a good season in its own right. A win this Friday at Sulphur Springs, Longview can clinch at least a share of its 10th district title in John King's 11th season as head coach in Longview. So they're doing what Longview does right now. They're winning in district. They're winning at money time, and I tell you what, nobody's going to want to play them in the playoffs. I mean, including their likely first-round playoff opponent, Lufkin, who beat Longview rather soundly in the opening week of the season. I mean, Longview, we talked about it, they're a completely different team right now. And although, we haven't heard anything since really the beginning of the season about running back Jermichael Hasty, who's missed the entire year with a back injury, the Baylor commit, who knows? I mean, he may miss the rest of the season and the playoffs, or he could come back. So that uncertainty has got to be weighing on the minds of some of these potential, 5A Division I, Region II playoff opponents. What if Hasty comes back and makes a Willis Reed-esque appearance in the playoffs? So it's going to be tough to beat Longview with the world that they're on right now. On Sulphur Springs, and everybody knows about Larry Pryor, the quarterback. He's committed to Texas A&M as a safety. Although he's making plays at quarterback, same thing he did last year. But a new star is beginning to emerge on that offense, and that's sophomore running back Jalen Hawkins. He had a big game last week against Pine Tree. He is one of those guys that I have a feeling once he gets into his junior and senior year is going to be one of the more coveted players in our region. From a recruiting standpoint, he's already got pretty good size. He's very fast. Kind of in the Willie Ivory mold from Sulphur Springs, a very multi-dimensional back, can be used at receiver, and also just getting carries out of the backfield. So Sulphur Springs is going to be put to the test, obviously. Longview doesn't lose district games very often. I think they only have 3 since John King has been the head coach, and this is his 11th year leading the Lobos. So Sulphur Springs has Longview at home. I do not expect Sulphur Springs to win. I don't think you do either. But you look at the way Sulphur's been playing the last few weeks. They've won 4 out of their 5 district games. A good performance against Longview, even in a loss, could go a long way in helping their confidence towards the playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Play a good game against Longview, and you feel pretty good about who you're going to draw in the first round of the playoffs.
Another big one on the agenda for Friday night is in District 11 6A. Tyler Lee, our only 6A team in East Texas, they host district-leading Rockwall, unbeaten Rockwall, at home on Friday night. And, Everything points to a Rockwall win. They've beaten some good teams out of district. They beat Denton Ryan in the season opener. They beat Mesquite Horn, which is leading their district. Rockwall's legit. I mean, they've put up some ugly defensive performances in the playoffs, but then again, so have most of the teams out of this district. I mean, this is not a district full of defensive stalwarts. I mean, you were on hand for a game a couple of weeks ago, Tyler Lane Garland, which more resembled a basketball score.
Yeah, 62-54.
So, but Rockwall's played the best defense out of the 8 teams in the district, and their offense is second to none as well. And when you talk Rockwall offense, you have to start with their running back, Chris Warren, just a tremendous player and one of the best running backs in the entire country.
Yeah, Chris Warren's a guy that I used to run across all the time at recruiting combines and things like that. And you name a school, he's got an offer from that school. He's a very powerful back. He tore his ACL last year, so probably a reason Rockwall wasn't as successful last year is because he was missing. And now they've got him back, and Tyler Lee's defense is going to have their handful with just that one player.
And we talk about it. You saw Lee at their worst in their rush defense. I mean, they gave up a ton of almost 600 rushing yards to Garland in that game. Markeith Miller, their standout running back, had a big game. But if you take that game out of the equation, the other 4 district games that Lee's been in, they've done a great job on rush defense. I mean, they're holding teams aside from that game to less than 150 yards on the ground. So there is something that they can look back on and say, hey, we did have success. We have had success stopping the team's rushing attacks. But again, they're going up against the best running back in the district. And their quarterback, Will Reed, has had a great year too. I mean, he's 23 touchdown passes, just 3 interceptions. They have 2 great receivers in Xavier Castile and Jay Galloway. So Lee's going to have their hands full. I do believe that the X factor in this game is Tyler Lee quarterback Zach Hall.
Yeah, Zach, and congratulations to him. He picked up his very first offer earlier this week from Texas Tech. I think they're recruiting him as a receiver. Just fantastic numbers, more than 2,000 total yards between passing and...
Yeah, dynamic athlete.
Yeah, way more than 1,000 yards, actually.
Yeah,
13 touchdowns on the ground to 11 passed, 855 rushing yards. I mean, he is their offense pretty much. I mean, it's all routed through him, and obviously... the coaches trust him to pull down the ball and run, and he finds success in open space. So that's something that Rockwall's going to have to watch out for. Yeah,
I mean, I was impressed by him last year as a sophomore, but then again, you saw that there were things that he still had to do, to develop, and especially in the passing game. But I think, and Coach Darrell Piskey made a great point about this back in the summer when talking about Zach Hall. He said Hall had not won the varsity starting job going into his sophomore season yet. So they had a different quarterback doing the 7-on-7 stuff during the summer, whereas this past summer, Hall was the unquestioned leader of the offense, the starting quarterback, and he gets to pilot that offense all the way through the summer, leads Lee to the state 7-on-7 tournament. They have some success there, and it's really come out on the football field this year. His passing numbers are great. Just like you mentioned, just 2 interceptions on the season.
1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns.
And like I said earlier, he's a dynamic athlete, a nightmare in the open field. So, if he reads the zone replay correctly and gashes and, gets into open space, he's a difficult man to corral in the open field. So I think his big play potential is a reason why I think Lee can hang into this game. But they're going to have to contain Rockwall's running game and Chris Warren. They can't let him run wild like he's been running wild all season in order to pull off the upset.
Now something they can do with their 2 running backs that complement Lee,
Wesley and Craver.
Yeah, Wesley and Craver. They can run the clock on Rockwall. I mean, keep the ball away from Rockwall as much as possible. You increase your odds to win this football game. And
Absolutely.
You got Juwan Barker at receiver. Mm-hmm. He's one of just a few in East Texas to have over 500 yards receiving now. That's obviously a nice threat to have and helps you balance out the offense when you need to go to the air.
All right, a big one in 16-5A. It sounds like a broken record. There's a big one in every week in 16-5A, but this is probably the biggest game. You could make a case for Lufkin Corsicana, but we're going to go with White House at Nacogdoches. This is a game that you'll be attending Friday night down in Nacogdoches. I believe your second trip down there this year.
Yes.
What are we looking forward to in this game as far as matchups and how this game may play out?
Well, it's all playoff seeding. We think that this game is going to determine the 4th place seed over who is the first team out. And both these teams have performed well. Nacogdoches started the season red hot with that win against Lufkin. They took a bad loss against Jacksonville in overtime, and that has set up this situation for White House to come into this game. And if they win, they've got the leg up for that final playoff spot. So a lot on the line, a really good receiving set and dynamic passing offense against what at the beginning of the year we thought was the best secondary in East Texas. And, of course, they've lost Brandon Jones at safety, but Jalen Lane and Corey Lane and Tay Forrest have held down the fort pretty well most of the time. And
Brandon Jones tweeted earlier this week that he's going to be back on the field this week.
Yeah.
So that could make a big difference.
And just a really good game with two really clear strengths, and we'll see what happens on Friday night.
Yeah, I think White House's emergence these last couple of weeks has a lot to do with their switch at quarterback. Nate Brooks has played really well. I expected them to beat Jacksonville last week, but not the way they did. And a lot of people will point to the Carter McCown torn ACL that happened during that game as a sign, because I believe it was 14-14 when that injury occurred. And White House ends up scoring 42 unanswered points. Jacksonville's offense can't do anything in the second half. But that being said, very impressive performance for White House, 56-14 over a Jacksonville team that's proven that they're a lot better than they were a season ago. They proved that the week before with that 5 overtime win against Nacogdoches. And we mentioned the playoff positioning. If you look at it, this is huge for both teams because White House loses. They're all of a sudden 2 games behind Nacogdoches with only 1 game to play. Lufkin, assuming that they take care of business and beat Corsicana, would be a game up on White House with a tiebreaker. So a huge game for White House. They have to win. Same thing for Nacogdoches. I mean, they come in with a game lead over White House in the standings, but if they lose, they're all of a sudden tied with White House. White House has the tiebreaker, and then you look ahead to next week, the regular season finale. White House has Lindale, Nacogdoches has John Tyler.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
So, big game for both teams. Should be a whole lot of fun. I'm sure you'll have a good time down there in Nacogdoches.
Yeah, and worth noting, Nate Brooks 2 starts and about 500 passing yards so far. So not a bad way to enter the season as a quarterback.
And now it's the ETSN Dairy Queen Game of the Week.
All right, stop me if you heard this before. Chapel Hill, Henderson, big stakes on the line. Yes, Chapel Hill and Henderson, while not competing for a state championship like they did back in 2010, this very well could be for the District 9 4A Division I championship. The only 2 unbeatens remaining in that district. Chapel Hill takes its high-powered offense to Henderson, and this is it's hard for me to handicap this game. I really don't know what to expect because, one, I haven't seen either one of these 2 teams play this year. I've just kind of followed them from afar. Henderson has played great. Obviously, they're 7-1, and they're 3-0 in district. They've really turned it on these last few weeks in district. I think they're outscoring opponents, by almost 40 points a game. They're really a well-rounded team. I mean, you talk about, especially on offense, they're really balanced. They got Zane Bowles who can chunk it. He's about 6'6". He's a tall guy. And then you've got the running game, which features Randy Davis and LaKendrick Van Zant. And they've put up points, not quite at the clip that Chapel Hill has. I mean, Chapel Hill has just gone nuts in district. They're averaging 57 points in their 3 district wins. Meanwhile, Henderson has only allowed 26 points total in their 3 district games. So this is kind of strength versus strength when Chapel Hill has the ball. And one more quick thing before we move on. That I find entertaining because there's so many subplots and different storylines coming into this game. For one, we mentioned it at the top. These 2 teams played for the 3A Division I state championship game back in 2010, a Henderson 28-21 win. But then you look at the coaches that have coached at these programs, and they're all linked together. You talk about Dickie Meeks, who's now at Pittsburgh. He was the head coach at Chapel Hill in 1989 when they won their first state championship. And ironically enough, Meeks was on the opposing sideline with Henderson in 2010 when Henderson defeated Chapel Hill. And then you look at Chapel Hill current coach Thomas Sitton, who won a state title the very next year in 2011. He replaced Phil Castles at Chapel Hill after Castles left to become the head coach at Corsicana. And now, of course, Castles is the head coach at Henderson. So, and plus these two schools are like 20 miles apart on Highway 64. So, a lot of intrigue in this game. And even Henderson pretty much wins the district if they win. I know they have a Kilgore, and that's a rivalry game next week, and anything can happen in those kind of games. But if Chapel Hill wins, they still got a big one next week against Carthage in the regular season finale. So it's very possible that we could see a 3-way tie for first place between Chapel Hill, Henderson, and Carthage. So, but first things first, Chapel Hill and Henderson, something's got to give there. So again, that's our ETSN.fm Dairy Queen Game of the Week. I'll be on hand for that. So make sure you check out the preview, which published this morning on our website, and then I'll be tweeting live updates all night from the game, so jump on Twitter if you're interested in that one. Now, moving on, we want to get a shout-out to our weekly standout performers on offense and defense, our players of the week. First up is Jared Blissett, the quarterback from Carthage, our offensive player of the week. 304 yards passing and a school record-tying 6 touchdown passes. And if you look at the 2 names that he's tied with for touchdown passes in a game, it's kind of a big deal. You got Anthony Morgan, who did it back in 2010 in Carthage's state championship game win over Cold Spring Oakhurst. And then Blake Bogenschutz, who's now a freshman quarterback at UTSA, did it twice. He did it once as a junior in a regular season game against Rusk, and then he did it in last year's state semifinal win over LaGrange. So big company for Jared Blissett, and obviously a well-deserved honor. Congratulations, Jared.
Yeah, bodes well for Carthage in the future.
Yes, no doubt. All right, defensive player of the week.
The ETSN.fm and Dairy Queen Defensive Player of the Week is Newton's Ronnie Elam, the Texas A&M commit. He had 16 tackles, a pick 6, and a forced fumble in a 44-26 win against Corrigan Camden.
Previously unbeaten Corrigan Camden.
Yeah, I mean that was a game for probably what will end up being the district championship game, and
Newton's scary right now.
They are. They've really turned it around, and they are the front runners in the team to beat in that district. They're going to play Garrison this week.
I believe Garrison lost this last week to Crockett, so I think that Newton's it. They're the only unbeaten team in that district, but still some playoff, district championship implications are on the line in that game, obviously. But once again, shout out to our offensive and defensive players of the week, Jared Blissett from Carthage and Ronnie Elam from Newton. Before we get out of here, we want to remind you guys that if you're interested, we have updated weekly stat leaders up on our website right now. We have standings as the season draws to a close. If you want to check out where your team is in the standings and how far they need to go in order to make the playoffs, you can do that. As mentioned before, we have previews up on some of the biggest games in the area already up on our website. Check those out. And if you have any questions or comments for either myself or Mike Graham, you can connect with us on Twitter. My handle is @ClintBuckley, and Mike, you are?
I'm @Mike_ETSN.
There you go. So that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. And until we talk again next week, have a great weekend and enjoy some high school football, East Texas style.